Good morning everybody and welcome to episode 3 of Where Movement Matters. This is Regan coming at you from Core Foundations Personal Training and Corrective Health Centre in the Bone Ross Concourse. Last 2 weeks we've been talking about multi-plane training, explaining how we can move in 3 different planes of motion and exercise in 3 different planes of motion. So the second segment we're going to talk about today is working in the frontal plane. Okay, we did transverse plane last week, we've got frontal plane this week and sagittal plane coming the following week. Put simply, training in the frontal plane of motion is basically where your shoulders and your hips are coming away from the body into abduction and into the body with adduction. Okay, it's also included in lateral flexion of the spine either way. Why should we train in frontal plane? Well, we don't live in one dimension, okay, which is often where we train. We live in life with rotation and lateral movement and everything going in all directions. So being really good in one plane of motion, which we tend to always spend a lot of time in, is not ideal because it makes us really great here, but not so great when we rotate, like I explained last week, and not so great when we need to move laterally. If you think of a lot of sports and just day-to-day movement, we're never just moving straight forward and back, we're side to side, we're rotating, picking kids up, stuff like that. Although it's very good to have a strong foundation first, probably in the basics of the sagittal plane, coming into the frontal plane and coming into rotation are also very, very important to help things like athletic performance, making your body more durable, having greater core stability, good for injury prevention, providing you can control it. So the key areas of frontal plane movement, as I showed you a moment ago, is from the shoulder, from the hip, and from the spine. Okay, so for someone who's not used to training or has limited experience, maybe sits down a lot, is weak, going straight into heavy frontal plane or rotational based movements, probably going to be a bit too hard because quite often, even when you're exercising in the basic plane of motion like sagittal plane, we're still having a resistance in the frontal plane and into rotation. So even though something may seem like it's one way, often we're resisting or working against that sort of stuff. So I'm going to show you a few exercises at the end of the video here of ways to train in directly in the frontal plane and also ways to train resisting in the frontal plane, just so you get a bit of an idea. Because at the end of the day, we're looking at abduction, adduction of here and here, and flexion. So things like side raises of both hip and shoulder, side planks, carrying a weight on one side, all working and resisting in and out of that frontal plane. So nice and short and sharp this week. If you're not training in the frontal plane, start training in the frontal plane, although take it easy first. Do a lot of resistance in the frontal plane first before launching straight into lateral lunges with weight and stuff like that, because if you're not stable around the hips and the shoulders, the frontal plane's where injuries can happen as well. So as per usual, train safe, train smart. We've already said train in the transverse plane. Now we're going to start training in the frontal plane, and next week we'll come at you from the sagittal plane. Anyway guys, have a great weekend and thanks for watching episode 3 of Where Movement Matters. So a traditional lateral plane or frontal plane movement would be just a weighted side lunge, something like this, making sure braking at the hips, leaning right into it, making sure we control it, being able to breathe, and obviously we can change sides as well. Really big on the hips, the abductors, bringing out and coming back in. Tough move, great for a lot of sport stuff, yeah? So really cool exercise to have a go at. So this is lateral spinal flexion exercise, but working in resisting this position. Because when we go into our, what we call an overhead Pallof press, the resistance band wants to pull me down. I'm going to start it at the sternum, press straight above the head. So at this highest point, it wants to snap me really hard into that lateral flexion, and I'm resisting against it. So too hard when that way, you come in a little bit. Too easy, you come out a little bit. So again, slight bend in the knees, squeeze your glutes, pushing straight above, breathing, and down. A couple of sets of 10 each side. You'll find one side's weaker than the other. Have a try it. Another great combination exercise to work into the frontal plane. Single leg stance, so resisting moving into the frontal plane. Works on balance. You can step out a little bit from the cable machine, nice and light to start with, and coming away from the body. Coming back in, coming away. Very hard to keep your balance. A regression of this would be to have your foot on a step and then work that single leg stance of support, and then to come off and really test yourself in a single leg stance, resisting both frontal plane and moving with your arm into the frontal plane. Great one to try. Work up to it though. Cheers.